Hi, Hoffa. I'm Demi.
And I'm Mona.
Thanks for tuning into What's Brewing. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. Super excited to be here per every episode. But March is a special month as it is Women's Month. And it is also International Women's Day, which we're recording this on the 8th. So it's definitely a significant day for Mona and I, especially in the field that we're in, us being women, identifying as women. But we're super excited to be here. How are you feeling, Mona?
I'm a bit rusty, to be honest. I feel like it's been a hot minute since I've been on the podcast, but I'm glad to be back. And honestly, there's no better day to be back than today, International Women's Day. As you know, as everyone knows, we are all for women. I've literally been on this track the past month saying, if women truly ran the entire world, it would be a better place. So I'm all for women over here.
It's funny you say that because I was talking to one of my guy friends, and I was suggesting something, and he was like, "Well, I don't think that's gonna work." And then he came back to me and said, "Remember that thing that you told me to do? Yeah, it worked." I said, "Yeah, see, so I just feel like if men listened to women, we would be in a better place." And he just started laughing. He was like, "Whatever." But I definitely agree with that statement. You know, we're all
I
about the
mean,
women empowerment here.
Beyonce said who runs the world? Girls. And she's a
Well, I feel like there's no better episode than to talk about, women, community building, self-isolation when you don't feel like community building, because I think a lot of times people go through self-isolation when they're going through things. But before we jump into our, topic and what's on the menu, do you have a hot take and what's in your cup? What are you sipping on?
Ooh, let's start with that. And I think the last episode I was on, I said I will start doing a mug of the day. So here's my mug of the day. It's
Cute. It matches
American
your
folk
frames.
art. It does. And it's actually it's a vintage mug. I didn't realize until recently. I was like, I should kind of Google image this mug. So it's a vintage, I think it's like a Japanese patchwork inspired mug.
Oh,
So
cute.
really happy with that. Just my coffee, regular coffee. But my hot take, which I'm really excited to share, is your free public library.
Oh, yeah.
I I have been in this phase. So I just came back from Cleveland. I was spending time with family there, and the entire time I was there, we went to the library every day. So honestly, I'm pretty sure no matter where you're at, of course, if you live within the US, there should be a free public library near you. I
Right.
believe it's federally or locally funded, so you shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
have to pay a single penny. Get you a library card if you're in Philadelphia. Go to the Park Central Library, which is where I'm at. So many resources you can't even imagine, whether it's free workshops, being able to use the internet, getting books. I'm a Kindle reader. You can get free books on your Kindle from the library. So I am just in my library era right now. It's probably my second favorite place to be if it's not a thrift store. So
I can go ahead and second that because if you know me and if you follow our What's Brewing social media page, I think I post on the stories some, but I use the library. I rent a lot of library books. I haven't jumped on the Kindle train just yet. That's definitely in the works, but I am a huge advocate too for using the library because as much as I want to collect books, I think what my strategy is going to be is I'll read and then whatever series I like the most, then I'll go purchase. But what really got me on this was when my family and I were thrifting, I found a Colleen Hoover book and I was like, oh, wow, I think I got it for $1.89, something like that. And it was one of the big ones. I think It Ends With Us, one of the big ones that everybody was reading, I want to say during COVID or around that time. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to keep spending money if I can more than likely find these books thrifted. So let me, I'm just going to see what the library has to offer instead of going and purchasing the book. So I'm a huge advocate. I rent a ton of library books. I rent 5 or 6 at a time. So I would definitely recommend using your library, and depending on, what area you're in, I think to your point of it being, that's your tax dollars going to work. So go use go use the library. We're huge advocates of the library, so we stand by the library.
Right.
I would say for my hot take, this is like very random, but I think it'll help a lot of people if you listen to our pod while you work out, while you're out for a walk, which I feel like a good bit of people, based on the amount of feedback we get, usually listen to our podcast when they're out for a walk or they're at the gym. But it is this SoundCloud playlist. It's this, I think it's called, I got to look it up really quickly, but I think it's called like a twerk playlist. Which it's really not, it's more like bounce music. I don't know how to describe it, but it's 45 minutes. So if you do a
That
hit workout,
totally
if you're
caught me off
doing,
guard.
that's why I was like, okay, that's why I was saying it's random. So it is this, I'm going to show it on the screen and I'll also link it, but it says a twerk workout mix. But pretty much what it is like Megan Thee Stallion, Nicki Minaj, but it's like a mix, just like bounce music or whatever. And the reason why I like it is because when you're working out, I feel like I have a hard time depending on my mood, what kind of music, what kind of playlist to listen to. Because like when I'm doing cardio, I watch something or I'm reading something. And then when I'm weightlifting, I don't like, nobody has time. Well, I personally don't have time. I'm not one of those people that sits at a machine and like scrolls my phone. So I just like to have something playing while I'm going through my sets. So I'm going to link that because that has gotten me through so many freaking workouts, especially if you're in your bad girl era, if you know what I mean, hot girl era. That is a playlist that you need to listen to. I promise y'all, you will go from like 3 sets to 5 sets, 2 miles to 3 miles. It's so good. So that's my hot take. When you were talking
I'm
about the library, I
laughing.
was like, what's something I can talk about? The gym, my playlist.
No, I'm laughing because have you ever been like on the treadmill and like a really good song comes on and you just kind of feel like you're about to start like dancing on the
Yeah.
treadmill?
You want to start really like,
And like
what do they
no one
call it?
else can hear what you're listening to, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like you want to start speed walking. Side note, did you know that there's that's an Olympic sport? Speed walking.
Girl,
You know, they
this might
create
plant
Olympic
our
sports for
fasciitis.
disqualified. Anyway, okay, so I think
Literally.
it's, I think, but to your point, this is before, I'll say this before we jump into the next topic. I'm not going on a tangent, but it's funny because, I feel like when you hit 25, and to all my 25 girls, guys, whoever's listening to this, your body really starts, the muscles stop working. So at 25, I feel like your feet start to hurt, your hands start to hurt, your joints start to hurt. I now remember when my parents used to say, don't worry, when you get older, you're going to know what we're talking about. And now I genuinely feel like I know what they're talking about. So I just wanted to put that in there
Yeah.
as we're growing and glowing. So let's talk about self-isolation and community building. I feel like I'll start, for me, like personally, one of my goals this year through Empowered and through just my personal network was to build community, was to go out more. I would say, not isolating myself. I'm definitely one of those people that when I'm going through something, I disappear, I go ghost because I don't like to talk about my feelings. I don't like to just explain what I'm going through. I like to lay low, pop back out and be like, hey, yeah, I was going through this, but I'm good now. And I know that's not the best. And so that's one thing that personally for me, I was challenging myself is just building community, especially during, I feel like this entrepreneur journey that we're on, it's something that is highly, highly needed.
Yeah. No, I am 100% that person. And in full kind of like transparency, which is what we're all about on this pod, I very much just recently went through that phase of like self-isolating, kind of like just being alone, which, I think it's a balance. Because being alone is not a bad thing. Like isolating yourself at times isn't a bad thing. So I want to like preface with that. Sometimes like you need to be alone with yourself. Sometimes you need to be alone with your thoughts. But I will like preface with there's like this fine line of like when it becomes harmful to you because you need support. You need a healthy support system, right? And not everyone has that, but I think that's one of the things I've been thinking about too is like your support system can look different. Like maybe your support system is your family, but some people can't depend on their family for their support
Right.
system. So you have to kind of like go out and find like, is your support system a book club? Is your support system, I don't know, like going to AA? Like that might be someone's support system, is your
Mm-hmm.
support system going to church? Like there are just multiple ways you can find community. But Demi and I were talking about this earlier and it had me thinking of like a butterfly, and not to be too like corny about it, but sometimes you're in your cocoon and you're in your cocoon for a little too long, which I think is like, in a way, you're kind of limiting yourself because you're too afraid to break out of that cocoon. But when you finally do, there's a metamorphosis that happens. Like, you
Hmm.
literally are changing from this caterpillar to a whole butterfly, right? But in order to do that, you have to come out of that cocoon. Um, and obviously, that looks different for everyone. But, that's kind of how I've been looking at like my own journey of like building community and like getting out of this self isolation mode. Because it's easy to feel like, oh, I don't want to talk about my problems with anyone, or I don't want to burden anyone and all of that. But there's so much you can learn from other people. There's so much advice that's out there. There's so many resources that are out there. So it's important to kind of like walk yourself back from too much self isolation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is actually a perfect time to talk about this because if it's one thing that we learned, I personally did not watch it, but I heard about heard it. I watched a Good Morning America segment on it, but I can't remember her name. I think it's Risa Tisa. Don't quote me on the name, but the Who the F Did I Marry woman. One of the big things that she talked about was she wanted to share her story because she felt like a lot of women could relate to it. And I think that's where we talk about community, right? It's like her sharing her story. I think I even saw a couple other posts of women that went through similar situations, maybe not to the extent of hers, but they went through something similar. And so I think that's to your point of like finding your community is more than likely you either have a story or a journey that can inspire somebody and help somebody, especially if you're on the other side, or you have somebody that can walk alongside you. And I think the first part, obviously, is finding community. But to follow up about this particular part, Mona and I were talking about this, is not putting all of your eggs in one basket with one person or one community. And so, the same way I hate to use this comparison, but the same way that people talk about diversifying your revenue streams and your income, I feel like you have to do with your community, your friend group. I think I personally have friends that are multi-purpose friends. I have friends that maybe you can only, go to professional events with them, or friends that are just up and go travel type of friends. But I think one thing that I've learned over the past couple of months and definitely over the past year is not putting all of your eggs in one basket with one person to fill your cup, because we don't realize how detrimental to our health, our wellness, emotional and mental health specifically, that does when we're not necessarily relying on somebody, especially, and I say this especially for those that are in relationships, because this is probably one of the hardest things is you go to your partner, you seek, those that emotional support from your partner, and then you realize that when things maybe are not going the best, you're not as full as you want to be, and you're actually operating on an empty cup because you're exhausting all of your resources making sure that this one thing works. And so I think the reason why community is important is, let's just say that you're going through that in your relationship. Let's just even say family. You're living with family, and it's one of those things that you're like, I got to get out of here, but I don't have the financial means to do it. Finding community is just so important, because if you're not getting it from one source, then you go to another source. It's like food, where each food is going to give us different nutrients, and we have to be able to know which ones to eat during certain times of our life. So I just kind of feel like that's also the second part of it, is like finding community and why you need to find community, not just to go share your problems and, like be an open book and share all your secrets and diary, your whole diary to somebody, but it's more so to really find that community and ensure that whatever you're sharing to people is something that other people can relate to, and then really support you through your journey.
Yeah. As you were mentioning that, it had me thinking of something that's been on my to-do list for the longest time ever. And I've been wanting to take sewing workshops. For those who follow me, I'm really huge on like sustainable clothing, thrifting, secondhand, like pre-loved. But the one thing I've never learned to do is like sew using a sewing machine, and like, to start kind of making like my own clothes. And that's been one of the things, like I came across this community sewing workshop. And actually had like a cool name. It was like social, but it was like SEW.
Oh,
So it
cute.
was like a social sewing workshop. And, that in a sense is a community where I can really foster like my artistic side, foster my creativity side, which I might not get, let's say, from like another community that I'm in, right? So I think to your point, it's being able to fill your cup coming from like these different places. Because and I love the point you brought up about like, especially if you're in a relationship, right? Sometimes you can feel like you need your needs, you need your needs to be met by your partner, right? But they can only meet so much of your needs, and it's not fair to you, and it's not fair to them or to anyone. It doesn't have to be a partner, it could be a friend, it could be a sister, it could be whoever, right? To expect them to show up 100%, because they might just be 50%, meet 50% of your needs, but the other 50%, you fill that cup by joining community workshops, volunteering, again, if you practice your faith, going to church, just going out in the going out in public, going to a park, going to the library, whatever that might be. And I think that's kind of the place I've been in, is like, you know kind of pushing myself to do that, but in a way that feels right to me. Because for anyone listening that can relate, like, I am a massive introvert. I think I've become way more introverted over the past few years. And I don't know what the word is. Not like I blame it on this, but I've been so extroverted my whole freaking life. Anyone who's known me since like high school, middle school, I've been like in every club, all that. Like when I was in college, like I was always out there. So now I feel like my body's just kind of tired of like masking and like trying to like be this like
Mm.
super social person, that when I am the most authentic version of myself, like I'm slow and I'm like quiet and I like calm. And that's something I've been trying to navigate too. But like, again, to the point we made earlier, is like, how do I balance that of like wanting to, like, feeling like an introvert, but also making sure that I'm still building this support system around me. So, one of the things too is that I'm struggling with, and certain friends, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry, because you'll know exactly what I mean by this. But it's like, even like making time throughout the week to get on calls with your friends, right? Like, I think the older we get, we kind of, all your friends are kind of like living different lives. Like, some of your friends are
Right.
having kids, some of your friends are getting married, some of your friends are traveling the world. And it's so hard to kind of like maintain those relationships. But this, or hey, I want to get a promotion at my job, or hey, I want to start this business. Like, we will be the first people to tell you, like, hey, okay, sit down and let me tell you, like, let me give you some strategies, whatever. And I was just having this conversation with my cousin the other day, and telling her that, I think she was just like really thanking me for my time, because I was giving her some like strategies and suggestions and advice. And I said, my this to me, like, anytime I can give back to women, especially like young women of color, specifically like young Chamorro girls, right? Like, if I can dedicate 30 minutes of my time to like mentor, guide, or give you strategies that I kind of wish I had at that age, like, I will always volunteer to do that. And I think that's a really big part. This is the point I was trying to get to, of building community, is like also recognizing that as you're trying to find community, that you should also be a safe space for other people. Right? That you're not just kind of looking for community for yourself. Like, it should be reciprocated, right? So that's something I've been trying to be more like cognizant of, is, am I also being a safe space for the people in my community? And what can I offer, whether it's like my wisdom, my experiences? Because like you said, whether you're talking to a friend or talking to someone in your book club or whatever, like, we can learn so much from people. And 9 times out of 10, whatever you're experiencing, someone else has gone through it.
Right.
And that is valuable wisdom that you can get, when you have that support system.
Yes, you said so many good gems. And it kind of started to make me think, how you were talking about you were very extroverted when you're your younger self. And now that you're getting older, you're a little bit more or a lot more introverted, as you mentioned. I think one of the things too that we also want to recognize is self isolation can also be social anxiety. I think a lot of people
Mm.
isolate because they're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to have to go out and actually socialize. And sometimes you can find yourself doing that even with people that you are close with, because I think that's another thing too, is like we don't necessarily have the cup sometimes that we think, the full cup that we think. So you're anxious to like go meet with somebody. You might be thinking I have too much stuff to do at the house, or I have too many things to update this person on, and they're going to be asking me a lot of things. And I think also too we have to advocate for ourselves still with like I'm not ready to talk about that, or like I'm fine, but I'll catch you up when that time comes. But I guess I have this one question before we wrap up because we don't want this episode to be too long because I think that it's so packed and layered. But what advice do you have to give to somebody who self isolates because they have social anxiety or even severe social anxiety? Like, where should they start?
Oh, that's a loaded question right there.
Or even if they've
And
maybe moved to like a new place and then they're looking to
right.
like grow their community in a new place.
I'll share this, and this is the first time I think I'm sharing it openly on this podcast or honestly wherever. Um, and I'm sharing this because, kind of side note, this is the first time I'm telling Demi too. I've been really, for anyone that knows, like by education, I'm a social worker, and I've been really diving deep into like understanding like not just like my anxiety, depression, trauma, and all of that, but like when it comes to even like a cultural lens, like how does that show up for me, right? So to your point, whether it's like social anxiety, or just it could be imposter syndrome, right? Like just not wanting to put yourself out there. I think for me, it really starts with looking inward. Like that might sound kind of like, I don't know, counterintuitive, but like when you're in that self isolation phase, it's important to ask yourself like why. And I think that we have to remember that our behaviors and our actions are oftentimes like a sign that there's something you need, like you're needing something. So for me, when I start to really self isolate, right, and I go into this like you said, kind of like ghost mode, it's easy to get lost in that. But sometimes, like if you just take a moment and ask yourself, like, okay, wait, hold on, like I said earlier, like walking back from it, like why am I doing this right now? Like, is it because it's a cry for help, or is it because I'm exhausted? Is it because maybe I'm masking? Is it because the communities I've been in aren't for me and I've had to like pretend to be something I'm not? Like, what is your self isolation communicating to you? Right? Is it you're burnt out? It could be a number of things depending on the person. So I would say my first advice is kind of like sitting with it and kind of trying to understand like why you're in that phase, and then from there you can better determine like what your next steps are, because it's different for everyone. Like for me personally, and I'm trying to get way more open about talking about this. I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and major depressive disorder. So when I go into my self isolation mode, I am now more like recognizing that, oh, okay, I think my depression is getting kind of bad, or like my anxiety is starting to spike up. So in those moments, I know, you know what? Let me message my therapist, or you know what? Let me reach out to my sister, because I need someone to connect to it. And for me, I know that that's what my body is telling me, is that I'm going back into that hole. So listen to your body. Like, more than you think but you have to really like listen to yourself so that you can then figure out like what's the best path for you, because it's different for everyone. So yeah, I hope that's helpful for someone that's listening, because sometimes I think we forget, like it's so easy to get lost in it. It's so easy to go deep into that hole. And if you know what the hole is, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's kind of like in a nutshell, my advice is like pause, take a moment, like feel your body. Like, where are you feeling the stress? Is it in your mind? Is it in your stomach? Is it the nerves? Like, what's going on with you? Like, take a moment to really like tune in, like be more tuned into yourself, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice. You can't really diagnose anything or figure out what the solution is if you haven't been able to identify the problem. So thanks for sharing. We can go ahead, wrap this one up. But before we go, I did want to let you all know I posted it on the What's Brewing social Instagram, but we do have a YouTube channel. So if you prefer video, and then also if you don't have the streaming platforms, the audio streaming platforms, we figured to go ahead and put that online at YouTube, or on YouTube as a platform, is something that we can also expand our, listenership, if that's even a word. I don't know if it is, but we do have that. So definitely check it out if you're somebody that prefers that platform. But thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you all next time.
As always, thank you for your support and being a part of the WBP family.
Don't forget to rate and review our show on whatever platform you're listening on.
And follow us on social media at What's Brewing Podcast.